Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has banked on a return to power by calling for an early election. One of the men he controversially dismissed, Yair Lapid, says Netanyahu would not form the next government. Lapid is the leader of the Yesh Atid party and he says he'll also run for the prime ministership. But analysts predict Netanyahu will win another term and shift the government even further to the right. Here's our Middle East correspondent Matt Brown, who's in Jerusalem.
Less than 2 years since the last election, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is looking to tighten his grip on power.
The
coming election is about one question: who will lead the country through the tremendous challenges facing Israel?
Analysts expect a more hard-right government taking a tougher line with the Palestinians. The latest polls show Mr Netanyahu's likely to be returned and join forces with his existing pro-settler coalition partner and Israel's ultra-Orthodox Jewish parties. He'd already fired his centre-right coalition partners, Justice Minister Tzipi Livni and Finance Minister Yair Lapid, accusing them of disloyalty.
The truth is that we have a Prime Minister who is afraid.
While Benjamin Netanyahu looks set to get the kind of coalition he'd prefer, anything could happen in Israeli politics where the public is notoriously fickle. But right now, peace talks are not the core issue for most voters, and Israel's opposition parties are polling poorly and deeply divided.
The key factor is whether the anti-Mr. Netanyahu camp leaders can agree who will be number one among them, and the rest will not stab him or her in back.
The elections will be held in mid-March. Matt Brown, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Gerald Steinberg is Professor of Political Studies at Bar-Ilan University in Israel, and he joins us now. Thank you very much for your time. I guess the world's attention has been very much on the tensions between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Why now call for an election?
This is, first of all, about domestic issues, and I think Australians will understand that. Mr. Netanyahu has a coalition that's not functioning. It's had much more internal disputes, including very much over the budget. One of the straws that broke the camel's back, if you want, that was not at all about external issues or relations with the Palestinians, which most Israelis do not see any optimism there, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but over the question of housing for young people, the extremely high cost of being able to afford a small apartment, finding jobs, finding proper income, all of those things, the price of basic goods and services which have gone up, and the gap between rich and poor. Those are the fundamental issues, and Mr. Netanyahu cannot, the government currently is unable to solve those issues because of all the different divisions. Yes, there are foreign policy issues as well, but it's the dysfunctionality that's really led to this election.
And Yair Lapid saying he is out of touch. Does that really relate to those domestic issues that you're talking about?
Well, Yair Lapid is obviously trying to get Mr. Netanyahu's job, and in any political process, in any democracy, there's a lot of mudslinging, a lot of attacks. That's how he's going to get him further his own agenda. But Lapid is, I wouldn't say marginal, but his party had about 15% of the Israeli electorate in the last election, is probably going to go down. So let's be careful about ascribing too much importance to some of these people who, again, see themselves as candidates, but don't have very much governmental experience. The charge that Netanyahu is out of touch does hurt, but it will probably not persuade a significant part of the Israeli electorate to change their opinions.
They would be concerned, I guess, from the outside world looking in, if the Israeli government would move even further to the right as a result of these elections, given there is so much expectation that there would be some type of peace negotiation that might end to some resolution to the ongoing crisis there externally.
I suppose many Israeli leaders and Israelis in the public would say that this outside world is out of touch with reality. The issues that Israelis have been dealing with for all of the 67 years that Israel's been around really haven't changed. It's about Palestinian refusal to accept the legitimacy of Israel as a Jewish state, as a sovereign state, like there are dozens of states in Europe that are national homes to people, also all the 55 Islamic states. Israelis see a lot of terrorism, incitement, hatred, and mismanagement. The wars that take place between Hamas that controls Gaza, the Palestinian Authority. This is not the time to go into a long discussion about the Arab-Israeli conflict, but so much of the discussion, so much of the presentation in the media and elsewhere, Israelis see an entirely different planet. This is not going to be very much about Israeli-Palestinian issues. Those are not controversial to a significant degree in Israel. Israeli public will see changes among Palestinians, a willingness to end the terrorism and accept Israel's legitimacy, and there can be peace. Without that, there's just no basis for going further. So the questions then become one of day-to-day life. How do Israelis live with the terrorism? How do we deal with the cost of living? Those are the kinds of things Israelis are going to be discussing in the election campaign.
So is there any alternative to Netanyahu?
Right now, there's no single candidate, not even among the various ones that are offering themselves, that look like they can reach that kind of consensus to be able to govern, to get a coalition which will represent over 50% of the members of parliament in the country. It's very unlikely. But again, 3 months in Israeli politics is a very long time. It's possible. There is a fatigue factor. Netanyahu has been elected 3 times after there was an interlude of close to 15 years in between. He is very controversial, particularly among those who do not accept his policies, and he has trouble governing his own party. Likud has moved, his party has moved further to the right. The people in the parliament that were elected, the Israeli Knesset, are further to the right than Mr. Netanyahu, who I think would be fairly described as center-right, and he's often misportrayed in the media. So the question is there somebody else who can appeal to the broad Israeli public in a way that is convincing, has the experience? They might find somebody in the next 3 months, but I would say it's unlikely. I think that process is going to take longer. But there's also going to be a sense that we need somebody else, we need some changes. If Netanyahu becomes prime minister, I think this will be his last term.
And interestingly enough, those domestic issues that you outlined are quite difficult for any government to necessarily to resolve.
That's very true, and in fact, you ran a clip of Yair Lapid, and you asked me about him. Yair Lapid is a former journalist, went into politics. His father was also head of a party, a small party, and he does present the questions and the issues to the Israeli voters, but as finance minister for 2 years, he was unable to deal with this, come up with any real solutions. They are very much part of the modern predicament in advanced industrial societies. Israel is one of them. We're a high-tech society, but again, the people that are not in high-tech, that don't have well-paying jobs, have a lot of difficulty. Young people have a lot of difficulty getting into that. In that sense, Israel is just like Australia and any other place.
Absolutely, a problem that's been played out in almost every country around the world. Great to talk, Gerald. Hopefully we can keep in touch as the campaign draws near.
Thank you.